You've been told to stay calm, be the bigger person, or just let it go. But let's be honest. That advice has never worked when your chest is on fire and your mind's screaming for justice. The truth is, you don't need another lecture on controlling your temper. You need someone to finally explain why you get so triggered and how to stop letting it control your life without going numb. Here's the hard-to-swallow pill. The person who annoys you most isn't the problem. Your reaction is. And no, that doesn't mean it's your fault. It means there's something inside you trying to wake up. That's why ignoring, suppressing, or clapping back never fixes anything. It just keeps you stuck in a cycle of emotional whack-a-mole, where peace is always one insult away from collapse. But what if I told you that anger is actually trying to help you, not hurt you? What if every emotional reaction you've had lately was a map to the parts of yourself you've been neglecting? Once you understand what your emotions are really saying, everything changes. You stop getting dragged. You start decoding. And you become the calm in the storm. Not because you're detached, but because you're awake. This video is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming unshakable. And it starts with unlearning everything you've been taught about just staying cool. So don't respond, at least not yet. There's something far more powerful you're about to learn. Anger isn't just noise. It's a signal, a flare shot from deep within, saying, "Hey, something here needs your attention." And the crazy part? Most people try to shut it down, drown it out, or feel guilty for it. But you're wiser than that. Anger is the body's way of saying that a boundary's been crossed or a need's been ignored. It's not a villain. It's a messenger you've been taught to fear. You don't get angry out of nowhere. It always points to something, and once you learn how to listen instead of react, everything changes. Think about the last time you snapped. Was it really about the spilled coffee? Or was it about feeling unseen, unheard, or disrespected one too many times? That's the kind of translation I'm talking about. You're not overreacting, you're overlooking the real message behind it. And believe me, decoding it is where your real power begins. Most of us weren't raised to speak the language of our emotions. We were taught to behave, not to listen. But when anger shows up, it's your soul trying to grab the mic. It's saying, there's a part of you that's been silenced for too long. Maybe that part was told not to make a fuss, not to complain, not to challenge. And so it learned to hide until now. Until you're finally ready to turn and face what's speaking through the fire. And here's what they don't tell you. Anger is just energy, waiting to be redirected. When you stop seeing it as a problem and start treating it like data, it becomes a compass. For example, if you get furious every time someone interrupts you, maybe it's pointing to years of being dismissed. You could use that realization to speak up with clarity instead of rage. Instead of lashing out, you could say, "I'm speaking. Please wait." That's not weakness, that's mastery. Let me be real with you. Sometimes anger shows up dressed as sarcasm, passive aggression, or withdrawal. It's not always loud. Sometimes it hides in silence or fake smiles. You might catch yourself stewing over something days later because you didn't express what you felt in the moment. That's the cost of not listening to the message. But the good news is you can learn to catch it sooner. You can become fluent in your own emotional truth. So the next time anger knocks, don't slam the door shut. Sit with it. Ask, "What do you want me to know?" Because behind every outburst, there's a piece of you begging to be claimed. And funny enough, when you stop running from it, you stop being ruled by it. You start seeing what lies beneath the surface. And that's where the real healing begins. You've been taught to treat anger like it's a defect, like something's wrong with you when you feel it. But what if I told you anger isn't the problem? It's the translator. It doesn't just show up randomly. It awakens a part of you that's been asleep or ignored. Anger reveals your edges. It doesn't break you, it breaks through you. That's why suppression never works. When you bury your anger, you bury your truth along with it. You might still smile on the outside, but inside, something is boiling. And eventually, it leaks. In snappy comments, silent treatments, or full-on explosions. But all of that could be avoided if you just paused and asked, what's being awakened right now? Let's say someone talks over you during a meeting. You get mad, and your first instinct is to bite back. But hold up, what if that anger isn't about them at all? Maybe it's waking up the part of you that's tired of being overlooked. Maybe it's touching a childhood moment when you were silenced or ignored. That's the part of you that's speaking. That's the part of you that wants to be healed. Anger doesn't show up just to start a fight. It shows up to start a conversation. But you've got to be willing to listen, even if it makes you uncomfortable. It's like hearing a language you don't fully understand. At first, it sounds loud and aggressive, but once you get the meaning behind the words, it softens. You realize it's not yelling at you, it's calling you. And here's where the shift happens. When you stop trying to control the anger and start trying to understand it. You stop reacting to everything that pokes your wounds. You begin to ask questions like, why did that hurt me so much? Or where have I felt this before? That's where you uncover gold. It's emotional archaeology. You're not just digging through dirt, you're finding buried treasures. Once you know what part of you is being activated, you stop seeing people as threats. You start seeing them as mirrors. And when someone triggers you next time, you won't immediately snap, you'll lean in. You'll ask, what part of me just woke up? And that question, well, it might just change how you see everything that comes next. Most people never stop to ask why they reacted so strongly. They just assume, that person made me angry, and that's the end of it. But if you're willing to go deeper, really dig beneath the surface, you'll find a whole story waiting to be uncovered. And spoiler alert, that story? It usually has nothing to do with the person in front of you. They're just the spark, not the firewood. The flame was already sitting there, waiting. Here's the hard truth. Reactions are echoes. What you're responding to now is rarely about the now. It's about then. That one time your dad laughed at your idea. That moment a teacher embarrassed you in front of the class. That breakup where you were ghosted without closure. These moments leave fingerprints on your nervous system. And sometimes, a stranger's words unknowingly press right on the bruise. And unless you look at the real source of the pain, you'll keep fighting shadows. You'll yell at your partner when what you really need is to grieve the way your voice was ignored growing up. You'll get defensive in conversations because years ago, someone made you feel like your opinions were dumb. This isn't weakness, it's programming. But the good news is you can rewire it once you spot the pattern. One powerful practice I use with people is writing out the scene that made them feel this way the first time. Not the current trigger, but the origin. When did you first feel that rejection, that dismissal, that deep sense of not being enough? Sit with that version of you for a moment. Let them speak. Let them explain why they built walls, why they raised their voice, or why they chose silence. That's where the healing begins, not by controlling your reactions, but by meeting the root. Because once you know the story, you can choose how it ends. You're no longer stuck in a loop, reacting on autopilot. You start responding from awareness, not pain. That's how the past stops controlling the present. And ironically, that's when the people who used to trigger you lose all their power. But here's the twist. Most people don't even know they're chasing peace in the wrong places. They try to control the environment, avoid the difficult people, and call that peace. But real peace, it doesn't come from adjusting your surroundings. It comes from something much deeper. Let's get something straight. What you've been calling peace might just be control dressed up in a tuxedo. Avoiding conflict, walking on eggshells, managing everyone else's emotions just to keep the vibe calm. That's not serenity. That's anxiety in a fancy suit. Feels safe, sure, but it's exhausting. You're not at peace when you're micromanaging your environment. You're just trying not to drown with a smile on your face. Real peace has nothing to do with perfect conditions. It's not about avoiding loud people, staying away from chaos, or only surrounding yourself with those who agree with you. Real peace is what shows up when the storm rolls in, and you don't flinch. It's what you find when you finally stop running from the part of yourself that's easily shaken. The part that still reacts. The part that still wants control to feel safe. And that's where the inner work begins. You start noticing the moments when someone's tone makes your skin crawl. Instead of blaming them, you turn inward and ask, what part of me feels threatened? Maybe it's your need to be respected. Maybe it's the fear of being misunderstood. Either way, the goal isn't to fix the world, it's to meet yourself. Because the minute you stop trying to fix everyone else's energy, you start owning your own. Let me give you a practical shift. The next time you're in a tense situation, don't focus on controlling the outcome. Focus on controlling your center. Take a deep breath, and instead of tightening, soften. Instead of defending, listen. Instead of reacting, observe. This isn't passive, it's powerful. It's how you stop being a puppet pulled by emotional strings and become the one holding the strings with grace. When you chase control, you end up anxious every time life surprises you. But when you chase clarity, when you lean into the discomfort instead of armoring up, you become unshakable. You learn to let other people have their moods without taking it personally. You let the room be chaotic and still hear your own breath. That's not weakness, that's strength refined by stillness. And the most interesting thing happens when you no longer need to control others to feel safe. You become free. But that kind of transformation doesn't happen alone. It happens every time two energies meet and create a reaction. Which brings us to something deeply human, often overlooked. Every time you meet someone, whether it's a stranger, a friend, or a family member, you're stepping into a lab. And like any good experiment, something's going to happen. Maybe it's calm, maybe it's explosive. But one thing's for sure, if there's a reaction, both of you are going to change. You don't walk away untouched. That's what Carl Jung was getting at. Personality meets personality, and the spark isn't just coincidence. It's alchemy. You've probably felt it. That one person who instantly gets under your skin, or the one who pulls something out of you, strength, joy, even rage, you didn't know was there. That's not random. That's your soul recognizing something that needs attention. Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's messy, but it's always meaningful. Because those emotional reactions, they're invitations, not interruptions. Think of it like this. If two chemicals touch and nothing happens, it means they're inert together. But if there's a flash, a transformation, or even a combustion, that's data. The other person just activated something inside you. And if you're wise enough to pay attention, you can grow from it. But if you're just trying to avoid the mess, you miss the meaning. You miss the chance to evolve. Let's say you meet someone who constantly criticizes. First, you're angry, but instead of writing them off as toxic, what if you asked, why do I care so much about their opinion? You might uncover a need for approval you've been carrying since childhood. That interaction becomes your classroom. Not because they're right, but because they pulled something to the surface. Something you needed to see. Every reaction is an opportunity, even the ones that feel awful, especially those, because those are the moments when your edges are exposed. And when your edges are exposed, you get to decide whether to defend them or reshape them. That's what transformation really is. Meeting yourself in the mirror of another and choosing what stays and what evolves. And some of the most difficult personalities you'll encounter are actually your greatest teachers. They reflect what you've yet to embrace, forgive, or understand. That's why some people seem to drive you absolutely crazy for no logical reason. But if you're ready to take the leap, I'll show you why that madness is more personal than you think. You ever notice how some people just rub you the wrong way? They walk into the room and your whole body tenses up, and you're not even sure why. Here's the uncomfortable truth. It's rarely about them. It's about what they represent. They're not just annoying. They're holding up a mirror to a part of you that you haven't fully accepted. And like any reflection you don't want to see, your first instinct is to break the mirror. Think about it. The person who brags all the time, maybe they're triggering your own fear of not being seen. The one who's overly emotional? Maybe you were taught to shut your feelings down, and their openness pokes at a wound. The one who's too confident? Maybe they remind you of the confidence you wish you had. The things we reject in others often point to what we've rejected in ourselves. That's why self-awareness isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. You can't afford to keep getting triggered and not asking why. Every time someone gets under your skin, ask, what are they mirroring back to me? Is it my hidden insecurity? My need to be liked? My fear of being too much or not enough? These aren't just questions, they're keys. And when you use them, you start unlocking freedom from the emotional roller coaster. It's funny, but once you start owning those disowned parts, the people who used to drive you nuts lose their power. Their presence no longer feels like a threat. In fact, sometimes you'll even feel compassion, because you realize they're just expressing something you once buried. And now that you've made peace with it, it doesn't scare you anymore. You don't need to defend yourself against your own reflection. Here's something practical you can try. Make a list of the top 3 people who irritate you most. Write down what they do that gets to you. Then ask yourself what part of you might be reacting not to them but to something unresolved inside. You'll be surprised how fast the pattern reveals itself. And even more surprised at how fast it starts to dissolve once you stop running from it. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to avoid difficult people. You need to meet the difficult parts of yourself they reveal. And the more you meet them, the more whole you become. Which leads us right into a part of you that most people try to hide, but is actually the key to your emotional liberation. So now that you know all this, what are you going to do the next time someone pushes your buttons? Keep reacting the same way? Or finally pause and ask, what part of me is speaking right now? Because here's the truth. Your triggers won't stop showing up, but your relationship with them can completely transform. Let me ask you this. Are you tired of feeling hijacked by emotions that don't even belong to the present moment? What would change in your life if your reactions stopped owning you? Imagine walking into a room and not needing anyone's approval to feel grounded. That version of you isn't a fantasy. It's on the other side of awareness and integration. The answers were never out there in the first place. They've always been inside you, buried under old patterns, old wounds, and the stories you've been told about who you're supposed to be. But you're not here to be small, reactive, or controlled by the past. You're here to become whole, powerful, and clear. The kind of person that doesn't need to prove anything because they know who they are. Now tell me in the comments, what part of this message hit the hardest for you? What's the one reaction you're ready to stop giving power to? Let's talk about it. And if you felt this in your gut, don't just scroll away. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay close. Because there's more coming that'll help you become emotionally grounded, spiritually clear, and fully you. If you're ready to dive deeper, I've got something powerful for you in the next video. It's not about healing in theory, it's about becoming unshakable in practice. So go ahead, click on it now. I'll meet you there.